Kang Ji-hoon was a man who never questioned his prejudices. At 38, he had clawed his way from the blood-soaked streets of Busan to the top of Seoul's most feared criminal organization, the Baekho faction. He ruled over an empire built on fear, precision, and absolute control. His name alone could silence a room full of hardened gangsters. His sharp gaze could dissect a man's intentions in seconds. His decisions were final, his punishment swift, and his enemies,
Are you not enjoying
well,
the
they
party?
didn't remain enemies for long.
Come on,
He
smile
was
for
used to
us.
power. His penthouse overlooked the glittering Han River, a kingdom of steel and glass where he held court over politicians, businessmen, and criminals alike. His clubs pulsed with neon and danger. His men bowed with reverence tinged with terror. And women
that is
flocked to him
absolutely
like
marvelous.
moths to flame,
The collection this
drawn by
season
his
is
dangerous
superb.
charisma, his cold handsomeness, his wealth that could drown generations. Yet Ji-hoon gave them nothing but fleeting moments. He had learned early that attachment was weakness, that love was a liability in a world where betrayal came from those closest to you. His heart, if he still possessed one, was encased in ice forged from years of violence and survival. But there was something else, something darker that lived in the shadows of his beliefs. Ji-hoon had inherited more than just ambition from his father. He had inherited prejudices, ugly, unexamined biases that festered quietly in his worldview. Among them was a particular disdain, an automatic dismissal of black women. It wasn't loud hatred, not the kind that announced itself. It was worse. It was the silent kind, the kind that never even considered them worthy of notice, that labeled them as fundamentally incompatible with his world, his culture, his life. He had never questioned it. In his circles, in the traditional hierarchies he navigated, such prejudice was simply accepted, unspoken but understood. He had built walls so high around himself that he never stopped to examine what lay beneath them. He was Kang Ji-hoon, the dragon of Baekho, untouchable and unchangeable. Or so he believed. What he didn't know was that his carefully ordered world, his fortress of control and prejudice, was about to shatter completely. One woman would walk into his life and dismantle everything he thought he knew about power, about worth, about love itself. That night was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The Lotus Garden was not a place for ordinary people. Tucked away in the heart of Gangnam, behind an unmarked door and a series of security checkpoints that would intimidate a military base, it served as neutral ground for Seoul's underworld elite. The restaurant's private rooms hosted negotiations worth billions, treaties between rival factions, and deals sealed in blood and soju. Tonight, Ji-hoon had come for business, a potential alliance with the Park family, another powerful faction controlling the shipping routes along the southern coast. It was a delicate dance. The Parks were proud, traditional, and suspicious. One wrong move could mean war. He sat in the main hall waiting for Park Sung-min to arrive, surrounded by his closest men. The room was exquisite. Dark wood panels, soft golden lighting from traditional Hanji lamps, the subtle scent of jasmine and expensive whiskey. A private string quartet played in the corner, their music a sophisticated backdrop to dangerous conversations. Ji-hoon was nursing his second glass of Hibiki 30 when the doors opened, and she walked in. Time fractured. The first thing he noticed was her presence, the way she moved through the room as though she owned not just the space, but the very air within it. She wore a midnight blue silk qipao that hugged every curve of her body, the high slit revealing long, elegant legs with each step. Her skin was deep, rich brown that seemed to glow under the amber lights, smooth and flawless like polished mahogany. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, a few carefully placed curls framing a face that struck him like a physical blow. High cheekbones, full lips painted a deep burgundy, and eyes. God, her eyes. Dark, intelligent, assessing everything with a calm confidence that bordered on regal. She wasn't supposed to be here. Women rarely attended these meetings, and when they did, they were usually silent decorations, relegated to the background. But this woman walked beside Park Sung-min himself, her hand resting lightly on a leather portfolio, her posture that of an equal, not an accessory. Ji-hoon's hand tightened around his glass. His mind, usually sharp and calculating, stuttered. A rush of conflicting emotions crashed through him, attraction so sudden and visceral it was almost painful, followed immediately by resistance, by that old, ugly prejudice rising like bile. What is she doing here? She doesn't belong. But even as the thought formed, his eyes betrayed him, tracking her every movement as Park Sung-min brought her to the table. "Kang Sejongnim," Park greeted with a respectful bow, which Ji-hoon returned, though his gaze kept sliding to the woman. "Allow me to introduce my chief negotiator and strategic advisor, Naomi Laurent. She'll be handling the details of our potential partnership." Naomi extended her hand, her movements graceful and deliberate. "Mr. Kang, I've heard impressive things about the Baeko faction." Her voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest trace of a French accent beneath perfect Korean. Ji-hoon stared at her outstretched hand for a beat too long, his mind warring with itself. Then, muscle memory and years of practiced courtesy took over. He stood and took her hand. The contact sent electricity up his arm. Her grip was firm, confident, her skin warm against his. "Ms. Laurent," he managed, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "The Parks have interesting taste in advisors." There was an edge to his words, a challenge. He expected her to falter, to recognize the subtle insult. Instead, her lips curved into a knowing smile. "Interesting. I prefer excellent. But I suppose taste is subjective, Mr. Kang. Some people can't recognize value when it's standing right in front of them." One of his men inhaled sharply. No one spoke to Ji-hoon like that. No one. But before he could respond, Park Sung-min laughed, breaking the tension. "I told you she was formidable, Kang Sejongnim. Shall we sit? We have much to discuss." The meeting that followed was unlike any Ji-hoon had experienced. Naomi Laurent wasn't just present. She dominated. She laid out the terms of the alliance with precision, her analysis of shipping routes, risk factors, and profit margins so thorough that even Ji-hoon's own financial advisor looked impressed. She anticipated objections before they were raised, countered concerns with data, and negotiated with a steel wrapped in silk. And through it all, Ji-hoon couldn't stop watching her. The way she tilted her head when considering a point, the way her fingers, adorned with simple gold rings, gestured as she spoke, the way she met his challenges head-on, never backing down, never diminishing herself. She was magnificent, and that terrified him. "Mr. Kang, do you agree to the revised profit split?" Her voice cut through his thoughts. He realized he'd been staring. His second-in-command, Min Seok, gave him a subtle look of concern. Ji-hoon never lost focus. Never. "The terms are acceptable," he said carefully. "Acceptable?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. "From what I understand, you don't settle for acceptable, Mr. Kang. You demand excellence. So let me be clearer. These terms are more than fair. They're generous. The question is whether you're visionary enough to see the long-term benefits, or if you're too caught up in—" She paused, her gaze holding his. "Outdated perspectives." The room went silent. Everyone knew she'd just called him out, though on what exactly remained artfully ambiguous. Ji-hoon felt something crack inside him. Whether it was anger or admiration, he couldn't tell. "You're bold, Miss Laurent." "I'm honest," she corrected. "There's a difference." For the first time in years, Ji-hoon felt genuinely off balance. And beneath the discomfort, beneath the stubborn prejudice that whispered she was wrong, that she didn't belong, there was something else growing, something dangerous. Fascination. The meeting concluded with a handshake agreement to move forward, pending final contract details. As the Parks prepared to leave, Ji-hoon found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "Ms. Laurent." She turned, and he felt pinned by her gaze. "Where did Park Sejong-nam find someone with your expertise?" It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. Where did you come from? How did you end up here? What are you really? Naomi's smile was enigmatic. "I go where I'm valued, Mr. Kang, where my skills are recognized regardless of packaging." She let that sink in, then added, "Perhaps we'll speak again. I have a feeling this partnership will require careful navigation." She left with Park Sung-min, her heels clicking against marble, and Ji-hoon stood there feeling like he'd just survived a hurricane. Min-seok approached cautiously. "Sejong-nam, are you all right? You seemed distracted." Ji-hoon downed the rest of his whiskey in one burning swallow. "Find out everything about her. Everything." "Sir, Naomi Laurent. I want to know who she is, where she came from, how she connected with the Parks. I want her history, her education, her vulnerabilities, everything." Min-seok hesitated. "May I ask why?" Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. "Because she's either an asset or a threat, and I need to know which." But as he returned to his penthouse that night, the city lights spreading below him like fallen stars, Ji-hoon knew he was lying to himself. His interest in Naomi Laurent had nothing to do with business strategy. For the first time in his carefully controlled life, Kang Ji-hoon was obsessed, and the woman who'd captured his attention was exactly the kind of woman he'd spent his entire life dismissing. The prejudice that had seemed so solid, so unquestionable, had just met its first real challenge, and it was crumbling. The file Min-seok delivered 3 days later was thick, detailed, and utterly fascinating. Naomi Laurent, age 32, born in Paris to a French Senegalese mother and Senegalese father, both academics, educated at Sciences Po and the London School of Economics, fluent in 6 languages, including Korean, which she'd learned during a stint working for a multinational consulting firm in Seoul 5 years ago. She'd made a name for herself in international business negotiations, particularly in Asia, before the Park family had recruited her specifically for her ability to bridge cultural divides and see opportunities others missed. She lived in a modest apartment in Itaewon, drove a sensible car, and had no criminal record. Her reputation was sterling, brilliant, ethical, fiercely independent. There was nothing in the file to justify Ji-hoon's prejudice, and that made it worse because it meant confronting the ugly truth. His dismissal of her had never been about facts. It had been about bias, pure and simple. Ji-hoon stared at her photograph, a professional headshot where she looked directly at the camera with that same confident, knowing expression. He'd looked at this image a dozen times already, each time feeling that same pull, that same unsettling attraction. "She's clean, Sejong-nam," Min-seok reported. "By all accounts, she's exactly what she appears to be, exceptional at her job." And her relationship with Park Sung-min? Purely professional. He recruited her 2 years ago specifically for expansion into European and African markets. She's increased their international revenue by 40%. They trust her completely. Ji-hoon dismissed Min-seok and sat in his office, the file open before him, his mind churning. He should leave this alone, focus on business. The alliance with the Parks was proceeding smoothly. There was no reason to pursue whatever this was. But that night, alone in his vast penthouse, Ji-hoon did something he never did. He admitted, if only to himself, that he wanted to see her again. Not for business, for himself. The universe, it seemed, was listening. 2 weeks later, Ji-hoon received an invitation to an exclusive charity gala, hosted by the Seoul Cultural Foundation. It was one of those events where legitimate business people mingled with the city's elegant criminals, everyone pretending not to know which category each person belonged to. Ji-hoon normally avoided such gatherings, but when he saw that the Park family was listed among the sponsors, he accepted. The gala was held at the Schilla Hotel, the grand ballroom transformed into a wonderland of ice sculptures and white roses. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across hundreds of guests in tuxedos and gowns. A string orchestra played Vivaldi. Ji-hoon arrived with his usual entourage, cutting an impressive figure in a tailored black Tom Ford tuxedo. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging greetings, assessing opportunities and threats with every conversation. And then he saw her. Naomi stood near one of the floor-to-ceiling windows framed by the Seoul skyline like a portrait. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, the fabric flowing like water, the neckline elegant and modest, yet somehow devastatingly sensual. Her hair was down tonight, natural curls cascading over her shoulders, and she wore minimal jewelry, just gold earrings that caught the light when she moved. She was speaking with Park Sung-min and his wife, laughing at something, her entire face lighting up with genuine joy. Ji-hoon's breath caught. She was the most beautiful woman in the room, and it wasn't even close. He watched her for long minutes, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he walked over. "Park Sejongnim," Ji-hoon greeted with a bow. "Mrs. Park, Ms. Laurent." Naomi's eyes met his, and for just a second, something flickered in them. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "Mr. Kang, what a pleasant surprise." "The Parks keep excellent company," Ji-hoon said smoothly. "I couldn't resist." Park Sung-min, ever the diplomat, smiled. "Ms. Laurent was just telling us about her recent trip to Dakar. Fascinating city, apparently." "It's where my father's family is from," Naomi explained. "I try to visit every year. It's important to stay connected to your roots, don't you think, Mr. Kang?" There was no challenge in her voice, just genuine interest. But Ji-hoon felt the weight of the question. His own roots, what had they taught him besides survival and prejudice? "I believe," he said carefully, "that we're shaped by where we come from, but we're defined by what we choose to become." Naomi's gaze sharpened with interest. "That's surprisingly philosophical for a businessman." "I'm full of surprises." "Clearly." The Parks excused themselves to greet other guests, leaving Ji-hoon and Naomi alone. An awkward silence stretched for a moment before she spoke. "Are you here for business or pleasure, Mr. Kang?" "Tonight? Neither. I'm here because—" He paused, something in her directness making him reckless with honesty. "Because I hope to see you again." Naomi blinked, clearly not expecting such bluntness. Then her lips curved into a slow smile. "Well, that's refreshingly honest." "You said you preferred honesty." "I did." She studied him, her gaze both assessing and something softer. "Though I'll admit I'm curious about your sudden interest. At our meeting, you seemed less than thrilled by my presence." Ji-hoon felt heat creep up his neck, an unfamiliar sensation. "I was caught off guard. You weren't what I expected." "Because I'm a woman, or because I'm black?" The directness of the question hit him like a slap. He could lie, deflect, use smooth words to avoid the truth. But something about her, the way she looked at him, unflinching and unafraid, demanded honesty. "Both," he admitted quietly, "and I'm not proud of that." The silence that followed felt enormous. Ji-hoon waited for her disgust, her dismissal, the righteous anger he deserved. Instead, Naomi tilted her head, considering. "At least you're honest about it. Most people hide behind polite denials." She paused, then asked, "And now? What do you think now?" Ji-hoon met her gaze. "Now I think I was a fool, and I'd like the chance to prove I can be less of one." A surprised laugh escaped her, genuine and warm. "That might be the strangest thing anyone's ever said to me at one of these events." "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe." She sipped her champagne, her eyes never leaving his. "I don't make things easy, Mr. Kang. If you're looking for someone who'll simply agree with you or fit neatly into your world, I'm not her." I'm beginning to realize that, Ji-hoon said, and I'm beginning to think that's exactly what I need. For the next hour, they talked, really talked, about everything and nothing, her work, his business empire, the legal parts at least, books, music, the strange experience of being outsiders in different ways. Naomi spoke about the casual racism she'd encountered in Korea, how some people assumed she couldn't speak the language, how others fetishized or dismissed her. She spoke without self-pity, just matter-of-fact observation, and Ji-hoon listened, really listened, hearing things he'd never considered, seeing his world through eyes that had experienced it so differently from his own. "You know what's strange?" Naomi said as the evening drew to a close. "I came to Seoul expecting to feel like an outsider, and I do sometimes. But I've also found that excellence speaks its own language. When you're undeniably good at what you do, it's harder for people to dismiss you." "You're not just good," Ji-hoon said. "You're exceptional." She smiled. "Careful, Mr. Kang. That almost sounded like a compliment." "It was." He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "May I have your number? I'd like to continue this conversation, perhaps over dinner." Naomi regarded him for a long moment. Ji-hoon felt that strange nervousness again, like a teenager asking someone to prom. Finally, she recited her number. "One dinner," she said. "Impress me." As she walked away, Ji-hoon stood there feeling like he'd just won a negotiation more important than any billion-won deal. Min-seok appeared at his elbow. "Sejong-nim, we should go. Early meeting tomorrow." But Ji-hoon barely heard him. He was staring at Naomi's name in his phone, a slow smile spreading across his face. For the first time in years, Kang Ji-hoon was excited about something that had nothing to do with power or money. He was excited about possibility. The dinner happened 3 days later at a private restaurant Ji-hoon owned in Gangnam, a place off the books where he conducted sensitive business. Tonight, though, he'd cleared the entire establishment, leaving just the chef, one server, and an atmosphere of intimate luxury. Naomi arrived in a simple black dress, elegant but understated, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked around the empty restaurant, one eyebrow raised. "Subtle," she commented dryly. Ji-hoon couldn't help but smile. "I wanted privacy and your undivided attention." That sounds vaguely threatening. It wasn't meant to be. He pulled out her chair, an old-fashioned gesture that earned him a surprised look. "I simply wanted to talk without an audience." The meal was exquisite. Course after course of refined Korean cuisine prepared by one of Seoul's best chefs, but Ji-hoon barely tasted it. He was too focused on Naomi, on the way candlelight played across her features, on the sound of her laugh when he said something unexpectedly funny, on the sharp intelligence in her eyes when they debated everything from economic policy to the best way to eat samgyeopsal. "You're not what I expected," Naomi admitted halfway through the meal. "What did you expect?" "Someone harder, more closed off. The man I met at the Lotus Garden seemed carved from stone." Ji-hoon considered his next words carefully. "I've spent most of my life building walls. It's how I survived, how I succeeded. But walls also keep things out. Good things. Like what? Like connection, like honesty, like..." He paused, then decided to risk it. "Like someone who challenges me to be better than I am." Naomi set down her chopsticks, her full attention on him now. "Kang Ji-hoon, are you trying to charm me? Is it working?" She laughed, and the sound settled into his chest like warmth. "Maybe. A little." Then her expression grew serious. "But I need to know something. That first night, you admitted you had prejudices about women like me. Have those changed? Or are you just curious about something different?" The question was pointed, painful, necessary. Ji-hoon put down his own chopsticks and met her gaze directly. "I was raised in a world with very narrow definitions of what was acceptable, what was valuable. I inherited biases I never examined, and you're right. I did dismiss black women. I saw them as fundamentally different, incompatible with my world. He took a breath. But meeting you forced me to confront how ugly and unfounded those beliefs were. You're not different because of your skin color. You're exceptional because of who you are, your mind, your strength, your grace. And if I was too blind to see that before, then the failing was mine, not yours. Silence hung between them. Ji-hoon felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he never allowed himself to be. Then Naomi reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "That," she said softly, "is the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me." From that night on, everything changed. They began seeing each other regularly, dinners that stretched into long conversations, walks along the Han River at midnight when the city quieted, visits to art galleries where Naomi taught him to see beauty in abstract forms he'd always dismissed as pretentious. Ji-hoon found himself sharing pieces of his life he'd never told anyone. The poverty of his childhood, stealing food to survive, his father's death in a gang war when Ji-hoon was 15, the brutal climb through the organization's ranks, each step marked by violence and sacrifice, the loneliness at the top, and Naomi shared her own stories, growing up between cultures, never quite French enough for Paris, never quite African enough for Dakar, never quite Korean enough for Seoul, the casual racism that wore you down like water on stone, the constant need to prove yourself twice as hard for half the recognition. But she also shared her joys, her love of dance, her close relationship with her parents, her dream of eventually consulting for social enterprises that actually helped communities instead of just extracting profit. They were, in so many ways, from different worlds, and yet something fundamental resonated between them. Ji-hoon felt himself changing, softening. His men noticed the way the Sejongnim smiled more, laughed occasionally, seemed less quick to brutal solutions. Min Seok, brave enough to comment, said it was like watching ice thaw. But not everyone was pleased. The first real challenge came from within Ji-hoon's own organization. During a meeting with his top lieutenants discussing the expansion of their operations, one of them, Park Dong-wook, a veteran member and traditional hardliner, spoke up. "Sejongnim, there are concerns about your recent association." The room went tense. Everyone knew what Dong-wook meant. Ji-hoon's voice went cold. "Concerns? This foreign woman you've been seen with. People are talking. They say it makes you look weak, distracted. They question your judgment." "They?" Ji-hoon's tone could have frozen fire. "Or you?" Dong-wook had the sense to look uncomfortable, but he pressed on. "I speak out of loyalty, Sejongnim. A man in your position, with your responsibilities, there are expectations, certain standards." Ji-hoon stood slowly. The temperature in the room plummeted. "Let me be very clear. Who I spend my time with is not open for discussion. And if anyone suggests that Naomi Laurent is anything less than extraordinary, they'll answer to me personally. Do I make myself clear?" Dong-wook bowed his head. "Yes, Sejongnim." But Ji-hoon could see it in the man's eyes, in the subtle glances exchanged between others. The prejudice ran deep. To them, Naomi was an outsider, an inappropriate choice, a liability. Ji-hoon dismissed the meeting and stood alone in his office, rage and frustration churning inside him. He'd thought conquering his own biases would be enough. He hadn't considered how deeply those same prejudices ran through his entire world. That night, he went to Naomi's apartment unannounced. She opened the door in comfortable clothes, yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, clearly not expecting company. "Ji-hoon, what's wrong?" He stepped inside, and suddenly all the words he'd planned evaporated. He just looked at her, this brilliant, beautiful woman who'd somehow become essential to him, and felt the weight of everything pressing down. "They don't accept you," he said finally. "My organization. They see you as a distraction, a weakness. They think I'm making a mistake." Naomi's expression grew guarded. "And do you think you're making a mistake?" "No." The word came out fierce, absolute. "But I'm realizing that being with me might cause you problems I never wanted you to face." She studied him for a long moment, then stepped closer, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. "Ji-hoon, I'm a black woman who chose to build a career in Asia. Do you think I don't know about facing prejudice, about people dismissing me before I even speak, about having to be twice as good just to be considered equal? This is different. These are dangerous people. And you think I can't handle danger?" Her eyes flashed. "I've been handling it my entire life, just in different forms. The question isn't whether I can survive your world. The question is whether you have the courage to let me in." Something in Ji-hoon's chest cracked open. Without thinking, he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his face buried in the curve of her neck. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not," she agreed, but her arms came around him too, holding him just as tightly. "But maybe that's not the point." They stood like that for a long time, finding strength in each other, two people from different worlds choosing to build something new. The crisis came 6 weeks later. A rival organization, the Jopak Dragons, saw opportunity in what they perceived as Ji-hoon's distraction. They moved aggressively into Beko territory, starting with small provocations, roughing up some of their lower-level operators, interfering with shipments, testing whether the Dragon of Beko still had teeth. Ji-hoon responded with calculated violence, reminding everyone exactly why he'd risen to the top. But the dragons escalated, and soon Seoul's underworld was whispering about potential war. And then they made a critical mistake. They targeted Naomi. Ji-hoon was in a meeting when Min Seok burst in, his face pale. "Sejongnim, it's Ms. Laurent. The dragons grabbed her car near Itaewon. They have her." The world stopped. For one frozen moment, Ji-hoon felt something he hadn't experienced in years, pure primal fear. Then it transformed into rage so absolute, so consuming, that his vision actually narrowed. "Mobilize everyone," he said, his voice deadly calm. "I want every resource, every contact, every piece of leverage we have. Find out where they took her, now." It took 45 minutes. 45 minutes of pure hell where Ji-hoon's mind conjured every possible horror. Then the call came. They'd traced her to a warehouse in Incheon, an abandoned facility the dragons used for interrogations. Ji-hoon didn't wait for strategy. He took 15 of his best men and drove there himself, armed and beyond reason. The warehouse was guarded, but not well enough. Ji-hoon's men moved with military precision, taking down sentries silently. Then Ji-hoon kicked open the main door, gun drawn, ready to paint the walls red. Inside, Naomi sat tied to a chair, her lips split, her dress torn, but her eyes were blazing with defiant fury. 3 dragon members surrounded her, one holding a knife. The man with the knife turned, sneering. "Kang Ji-hoon, we were hoping—" Ji-hoon shot him. Didn't hesitate, didn't negotiate. Just put a bullet through the man's shoulder, sending him screaming to the ground. Then he aimed at the next man. "Get away from her!" The dragons scrambled back, hands raised. Ji-hoon's men poured into the warehouse, securing the others while Ji-hoon moved to Naomi, dropping to his knees, his hands shaking as he cut through the ropes. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm okay," Naomi said, though her voice trembled. "They were trying to scare me, to get information about you, but I didn't tell them anything." Ji-hoon pulled her into his arms, his entire body shaking with relief and residual rage. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. This is my fault." "Stop." Naomi pulled back, her hands framing his face. "This is not your fault. These people chose violence. You didn't." But Ji-hoon could barely hear her over the roaring in his head. He stood, helping her up, then turned to the captured dragons. His voice, when he spoke, promised death. Tell your boss that if he ever comes near her again, if he even speaks her name, I will erase his entire organization from existence. Do you understand?" They understood. Ji-hoon drove Naomi to a private doctor, one who treated people in their world with no questions asked. As the doctor cleaned her wounds, minor, thankfully mostly superficial, Ji-hoon sat beside her, holding her hand, something fundamental shifting inside him. He'd always known he cared about Naomi, but feeling her life threatened, seeing her in danger, had clarified something with absolute certainty. He loved her, completely, irrevocably, in a way that terrified and exhilarated him. That night, in his penthouse with Naomi resting in his bedroom under guard, Ji-hoon called an emergency meeting of his organization. Every major player in the Baeko faction gathered in his private conference room, the air thick with tension. Ji-hoon stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding absolute attention. "Today, the dragons made a mistake," he began, his voice cold and controlled. "They thought they could use someone I care about to weaken me. They were wrong. But their mistake revealed something I need to address directly." He looked around the room, meeting every eye. "Some of you have questioned my relationship with Naomi Laurent. You've suggested she's a distraction, that she makes me weak, that she's inappropriate for a man in my position." He paused, letting the words hang. "You're wrong about all of it." Dongwook shifted uncomfortably, but Ji-hoon kept going. "Naomi Laurent is the strongest, most brilliant woman I've ever met. She's challenged me, improved me, made me question beliefs I never examined. And yes, she's a black woman. Yes, she's an outsider to our world. And that's exactly why she's valuable, because she sees things we're too blind or too stubborn to see." He leaned forward, hands on the table. "I'm going to marry her. And anyone who has a problem with that, anyone who disrespects her in any way, can leave my organization right now. Because from this moment forward, she's under my protection, completely. And I will destroy anyone who forgets that." The silence was absolute. Then, one by one, heads began to nod. Min-seok was the first to bow deeply. "Understood, Sejongnim. Congratulations." Even Dongwook, after a long moment, bowed his head in acceptance. Ji-hoon had drawn his line, and his organization would follow or they would fall. 2 days later, when Naomi had recovered physically, if not emotionally, Ji-hoon took her to a place he'd never brought anyone. A private rooftop garden on top of his building, hidden away from the world, filled with traditional Korean plants and a small pond with koi. The sun was setting, painting Seoul in gold and crimson. Naomi stood at the railing, looking out over the city, and Ji-hoon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm sorry," he said again, "for everything you've been through because of me." "Stop apologizing." She turned in his arms, her hands coming to rest on his chest. "What happened wasn't your fault. And besides, I knew what I was getting into when I started seeing you. You're not exactly a normal businessman." "No," he agreed, "I'm not." He took a breath. "But I want to be honest with you about everything. My world, my business, most of it isn't legal. You know that. But you don't know the extent." "I have a pretty good idea." "And it doesn't bother you?" Naomi was quiet for a moment. "I won't lie and say I love it. The violence, the danger, it scares me, but I also see the complexity. You're not a simple villain, Ji-hoon. You employ thousands of people. You protect communities the police don't care about. You operate in a gray space because the world isn't black and white. Do I wish your empire was built differently? Yes. But I also know that you're trying to be better. I see that change in you." Ji-hoon felt emotion tighten his throat. "You see more than I deserve." "Maybe," she smiled softly, "or maybe I just see you, all of you, the good and the bad. I love you." The words came out raw, unpolished. I didn't think I was capable of it anymore. I thought I'd buried that part of myself so deep it was gone, but you brought it back. You brought me back. Tears glimmered in Naomi's eyes. "I love you too. even though you're arrogant and stubborn and way too used to getting your own way." He laughed, the sound incredulous and joyful. Then he pulled back slightly and dropped to one knee. Naomi's hands flew to her mouth. "I don't have a ring yet," Ji-hoon admitted, looking up at her with complete vulnerability. "I wanted to choose it with you so you'd have exactly what you wanted, but I couldn't wait another second to ask." He took her hands in his. "Naomi Laurent, you've changed my entire world. You've challenged every prejudice I held, broken down every wall I built, and shown me what it means to actually live instead of just survive. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you?" "You know it won't be easy," Naomi said, tears streaming down her face. "The world will judge us, your world and mine. There will always be people who don't accept us." "Let them judge. I don't care about them. I only care about you. And you know I'm going to push you to be better, to transform parts of your business, to use your power for good things. I'm counting on it. And you know I'll never be a silent partner, never just stand in the background. I wouldn't want you any other way." Naomi laughed through her tears, then pulled him to his feet. "Then yes, I'll marry you, Kang Ji-hoon. You beautiful, complicated, reformed bigot." He kissed her then, pouring everything he felt into it. Love, gratitude, wonder that this extraordinary woman had chosen him. Seoul glittered around them, the city they'd both claimed in different ways, and for the first time in his life, Ji-hoon felt complete. They married 3 months later in a ceremony that scandalized and captivated Seoul's elite in equal measure. The venue was the Shilla Hotel's grand ballroom, transformed into a fusion of Korean and West African traditions. Traditional Korean peonies and chrysanthemums mixed with vibrant African fabrics in gold, emerald, and crimson. A traditional Korean pie-back table sat beside displays of Senegalese baskets and textiles. It was a marriage of cultures, unapologetically bold. Naomi wore a custom gown that took everyone's breath away. White silk with intricate gold embroidery, inspired by traditional Korean hanbok patterns, but cut in a modern, elegant style that honored her figure. For the reception, she changed into a traditional Senegalese dress in brilliant gold and emerald, her beauty so radiant that even the most skeptical guests couldn't help but stare. Ji-hoon wore a traditional Korean hanbok for the ceremony, then changed into a tailored tuxedo for the reception. But the most striking thing about him wasn't his clothes. It was the expression on his face when he watched Naomi walk down the aisle. Pure, undisguised love. The guest list was extraordinary. Business titans and criminal bosses, diplomats and artists, Ji-hoon's organization sitting alongside Naomi's family, who'd flown in from Paris and Dakar. It shouldn't have worked, this collision of worlds, but somehow it did. During the ceremony, Ji-hoon spoke his vows in Korean, then repeated them in English for Naomi's family. "I stand before you a man transformed," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I came into this world believing strength meant isolation, that power required loneliness, that certain people simply didn't belong in my life. I was wrong about all of it. Naomi, you didn't just enter my world, you remade it. You showed me that true strength is vulnerability, that real power is partnership, and that love doesn't diminish us, it completes us. I was half a man before you. Today, I become whole." There wasn't a dry eye in the ballroom. Naomi's vows were equally powerful, delivered in Korean out of respect for Ji-hoon's world, then in French for her parents. "Ji-hoon, when we met, you saw me as an impossibility, someone who couldn't exist in your carefully ordered world. And you were right. I couldn't exist in that old world. But together, we built a new one. A world where love matters more than tradition, where growth matters more than comfort, where two people from completely different places can meet and create something beautiful. You chose to change, to question, to grow. That's the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Today I choose you, every complicated, passionate, transforming piece of you." When they kissed, sealing their marriage. The applause was thunderous. The reception was a celebration unlike any Seoul had seen. Traditional Korean drumming gave way to Afrobeat music. Guests ate bulgogi alongside tibudien, drank soju alongside palm wine. Ji-hoon's mother, who'd initially been horrified by his choice, ended up dancing with Naomi's father, both laughing despite the language barrier. At one point, Min-seok approached Ji-hoon at the head table, a rare smile on his face. "Sejongnim, I have to admit, I didn't think this would work, but seeing you tonight, you're happy, truly happy. I've never seen that before." Ji-hoon looked at his new wife, who was surrounded by friends, her laugh ringing out bright and free. "I didn't think I was capable of this kind of happiness. I thought I'd sacrificed it long ago for power, but Naomi gave it back to me. She's good for you, for all of us." Min-seok bowed. "Congratulations, Sejongnim." Later, as the party wound down, Ji-hoon and Naomi slipped away to the rooftop terrace, needing a moment alone. Seoul spread below them, the city lights reflecting their own joy back at them. "We did it," Naomi said softly, leaning against him. "We did." Ji-hoon wrapped his arms around her, and the world didn't end. Some people aren't happy. Some people never will be. But those aren't our people. Naomi turned to face him, her hands framing his face. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me, knowing it complicated your life?" "Every day," Ji-hoon said seriously. Naomi's eyes widened in hurt, and he rushed on. "I regret that I didn't find you sooner, that I wasted so many years with my heart closed, my mind poisoned by prejudice I never questioned. I regret every day I lived before you, because they were half-lived, pale shadows of what life could be." "You're getting poetic in your old age," Naomi teased, but her eyes shimmered with emotion. "You bring it out in me." He kissed her softly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being patient, for seeing past the man I was to the man I could become, for not giving up on me when I gave you every reason to, for loving me anyway." "It wasn't anyway," Naomi corrected gently. "I love you because of who you are, including your flaws, including your past. All of it shaped you into the man standing here right now, and that man, he's pretty extraordinary. Only because of you." They stood together under the stars, two people who should never have met, should never have fallen in love, but who had done both anyway. They'd faced prejudice, from his world, from society, from the worst parts of himself that he'd had to excise like poison, but they'd survived it. More than that, they'd conquered it. 1 year later, Ji-hoon stood in the nursery of their new home, watching morning light stream through the windows, holding his 3-month-old daughter, Min-ji. She had Naomi's eyes and his nose, her skin a beautiful blend of both their heritages. Her tiny hand wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. Ji-hoon looked down at her perfect, innocent face and felt something break open in his chest all over again. This child, this perfect, beautiful child, would never know the prejudice he'd once carried. She would grow up in a world where her parents' love was the foundation, where difference was celebrated, not feared. She would be taught to see people for who they truly were, not filtered through bias and assumption. "You're going to change everything," Ji-hoon whispered to her. "Your mother already changed me. Now you're going to change the world." Naomi appeared in the doorway, still in her nightgown, her hair wrapped, her face soft with sleep and love. "Talking to her again? She's an excellent listener." Naomi crossed to them, wrapping her arms around Ji-hoon from behind, the three of them a perfect unit. "What were you telling her?" "That she's going to grow up knowing love has no boundaries, that her father was once a fool, but her mother saved him." He turned his head to kiss Naomi's temple. "That she's the luckiest child in the world because she gets you as her mother." "Pretty sure she's lucky because she has both of us," Naomi corrected. "Reformed gangster father and all." "Reformed?" "Reforming," Naomi amended with a smile. "It's a process." And it was. Ji-hoon had begun the slow, dangerous work of transforming his organization, moving away from the most violent enterprises, investing in legitimate businesses, using his power to protect communities instead of just extracting from them. It was a long road, and there were still aspects of his work that kept Naomi up at night, but they were trying. Together. Little Minji yawned, her tiny face scrunching adorably, and Ji-hoon felt his heart expand impossibly further. "I never knew," he said softly. "I never knew life could be like this. Full, complete, real." "You do now," Naomi said simply. And he did. Kang Ji-hoon, the dragon of Baeko, the man who'd once dismissed an entire group of women because of ugly, unexamined prejudice, had found redemption in the most unexpected place, in love, in partnership, in the courage of one extraordinary woman who'd seen past his walls and the man who'd finally learned to let her in. He'd hated what he didn't understand. Then he'd learned. He'd changed. He'd grown. And in the end, he'd found not just love, but his own humanity. From hate to happily ever after. It was the most unlikely story Ji-hoon had ever lived. And it was the truest one. Thank you so much for watching and supporting Arura Love Saga. Your love, comments, and shares mean everything to me. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in the power of love to transform even the darkest souls. Let's keep growing together with love.